Life has a funny way of throwing surprises at you, and mine came in the form of Tom, a guy I met at one of those stuffy corporate parties my dad's company loved to throw. Dad's business was all about medical equipment, something I knew inside out, given I'd been crunching numbers for him since I could remember. But let's not get into that now. The party was one of those typical events, with everyone trying to look more important than they were, sipping on drinks they didn't like. I was there, pretending to enjoy my wine, when Tom walked up to me with a grin that could light up the room. "Hey, you look about as thrilled to be here as I am," he said, his voice carrying over the music. I couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, well, corporate parties aren't exactly my idea of fun. "Tom," he introduced himself, extending a hand, which I took. "I'm Anna. I work in accounting." "Well, my dad's the big boss here," I replied, a bit embarrassed about that last part. "Ah, the boss's daughter. Guess I should watch my step, huh?" Tom joked, but there was a spark in his eyes that told me he wasn't really worried about that. We hit it off from there, chatting about everything and nothing. He was from the branch in another city, a fact that explained why I hadn't seen him around before. Tom had that rare gift of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, even if it was filled with people. "So, what brings you to this thrilling event?" I asked, taking a sip of my drink. "Ah, just trying to meet the big shots, you know? Thought it'd be good for my career. But meeting you? That's the highlight of my evening," he said, and I could tell he wasn't just laying it on thick. There was something genuine about him. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, filled with laughter and teasing. He told me stories from his work, making even the mundane sound exciting with his wit and humor. "You're not like anyone I've ever met, Anna. You actually make me want to stay at this party," Tom admitted, and I felt my cheeks warm up with a blush. "Trust me, you're the only thing keeping me here too," I confessed, surprised at my own boldness. As the party winded down, Tom suggested we continue our conversation at a nearby cafe. It wasn't a formal date, but it sure felt like the start of something special. Sitting in that cozy cafe, sipping on coffee that was far too good for that time of night, we lost track of time. Before we knew it, the staff were stacking chairs, and we were the last ones there. "I should probably get you home," Tom said reluctantly. "But I don't want this night to end." "Me neither," I admitted. "But maybe we can do this again? Without the corporate backdrop?" "It's a date," he said, and it was. That night was the beginning of everything. Little did I know, it was also the start of a journey that would test me in ways I never imagined. As we walked out into the cool night air, Tom put his jacket around my shoulders. "Wouldn't want the boss's daughter catching a cold, now would we?" he teased, his arm lingering around me a bit longer than necessary. I laughed, leaning into his warmth. "Thanks, I think my dad can rest easy knowing his company's in hands that care so much about his daughter's health." Tom chuckled, his eyes meeting mine. "Oh, I care, Anna. More than you know." And in that moment, I believed him. I felt like I was on top of the world, walking beside this man who had come out of nowhere and turned a dull evening into one I'd never forget. The meetings in the cafe turned into dates, blending one day into the next until it was impossible to imagine life without Tom. His laughter became the soundtrack of my days, and his smile the light in any darkness I faced. It wasn't long before we decided we didn't want to be apart, leading to a wedding that felt like something out of a dream. My parents were over the moon about Tom. Dad, in particular, saw not just a son-in-law but someone capable and trustworthy enough to eventually lead his company. He made Tom his deputy, a decision that Tom took to with an eagerness that made my dad proud and me even prouder. After the wedding, I shifted to working as an accountant from home, balancing the books while managing the household. It was a life I'd dreamed of, filled with love and a sense of completion. We hoped to add children to our family, but life had other plans. Medical reasons made it impossible, a fact that devastated me but seemed to barely faze Tom. "It's just us then, and that's more than enough," he'd say, pulling me close, making me believe it. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm, with Tom diving into his new role at the company and me finding joy in the small things. Despite the challenges, I felt lucky. As the days turned into months and then years, the warmth between Tom and me started to fade, like the last rays of a sunset disappearing behind the horizon. It wasn't sudden, more like a slow drift that you don't notice until you're too far from shore. Tom was always at work, his new role at the company swallowing him whole. And me? I was at home, trying to fill my days with more than just chores and the endless columns of numbers. One evening, I tried to break the routine. "Hey, how about we go out for dinner tonight? There's that new place downtown that looks promising," I suggested, hoping to see a spark of the old Tom in his eyes. He barely looked up from his laptop. "Can't, got a ton to finish." "Why don't you order something in? Just make sure it's healthy, you know how I'm trying to watch my diet." I felt a sting at his words, a reminder of how we were spiraling into something I didn't recognize. "Sure, Tom. Whatever you want," I replied, my voice barely hiding my disappointment. The gap between us grew, filled with silence and unshared meals. Tom's presence at home felt more like a ghost than a husband. The man who used to make me laugh with his terrible jokes now barely spoke, his face always buried in work. One weekend, I decided to confront the elephant in the room. "Tom, we need to talk. It's not working. You're always at work, and when you're not really here with me." He sighed, a sound of frustration rather than understanding. "Anna, come on. You know how important this is. The company is going through a rough patch, and I need to be there. Plus, you working from home should make things easier for us, right?" "Easier? Tom, I'm drowning here. It's like I'm talking to a wall most days. And when you do talk, it's to criticize dinner or how the house looks," I shot back, my patience worn thin. His response was sharp, a flash of anger in his eyes. "Well, maybe if you took a little more pride in your cooking or how you keep the house, I wouldn't have to say anything. It's not like you have to deal with the stress I'm under at work." That hurt. More than I wanted to admit. The conversation ended there, with Tom retreating back to his work and me left to wonder where the man I married had gone. The divide grew deeper with every passing day. Tom no longer sought my company, his late nights at work becoming the norm rather than the exception. And when he was home, his criticism became more frequent. "Anna, can't you do something about your hair? And maybe hit the gym once in a while? You've let yourself go," he'd say, his words like daggers to my self-esteem. I started to retaliate, my words fueled by hurt and anger. Maybe if I had a husband who was home more than once in a blue moon, I'd have a reason to. Or maybe if you didn't expect a gourmet meal and a spotless house after my own long day of work, I'd have time for the gym. Our exchanges turned into battles, each word widening the gap between us. The love and warmth that once defined our relationship were replaced by cold indifference and biting remarks. The chill between Tom and me wasn't just about the silent dinners or the nights spent more with his laptop than with me. It was in the air, heavy like a fog you can't see through but know is there. And then, doubt started creeping in, sneaky and persistent. One night, Tom was later than usual, not that his late nights were anything new. But this time, he walked in with a smell I didn't recognize, a mix of perfume that definitely wasn't mine and something else, maybe guilt. I decided to confront him, my voice steadier than I felt. "Tom, where have you been? It's past midnight, and you smell like you've been somewhere you shouldn't." He brushed past me, irritation clear in his voice. "What now, Anna?" I was at work, then grabbed some drinks with the team. "Since when do you police my whereabouts?" His defensiveness put me on edge. "Since you started coming home smelling like another woman's perfume. That's when." Tom rolled his eyes, a dismissive gesture that fueled my anger. "You're being paranoid. It's probably just from someone at the bar. Can't I even go out now, without getting the third degree?" I wanted to believe him, to let it go, but the seed of doubt was already planted, watered by his indifference and nourished by the distance between us. Things between Tom and me were fraying at the edges, and not just because he was always late or smelled like someone else's perfume now and then. It was his constant nitpicking that got to me the most. Every time I tried to keep our home together, he'd find something wrong. One evening, fed up with his latest round of critiques about the state of the living room, I shot back. "Why don't we just get a housekeeper, Tom? It's not like we can't afford it." He scowled at me, like I'd suggested something outrageous. "And have some stranger poking around our things? No way. It's better you handle it, Anna. It's not that hard." I was simmering, feeling both insulted and exhausted. Not that hard? Between keeping the books for my dad's company and making sure this house doesn't fall apart, I'm stretched thin, Tom. But Tom, he wouldn't let up. It got worse. He started picking on my looks, of all things. "You've let yourself go, Anna. Look at you," he'd say, flicking the TV on to some celebrity news channel where perfectly made-up actresses and singers half my age smiled back at us. He'd point at them and then at me, as if I needed a reminder. "See, they look great. Why can't you put in some effort?" I tried to laugh it off, though it stung. "Oh, sure, because I have all the time in the world for spa days, and maybe a nip tuck here and there." He didn't laugh. "It's not about surgery, Anna. It's about effort. You used to care about how you looked." That hurt. It's not like I didn't want to look nice, to feel good about myself. But where was the time? Between my job and running the household, I was lucky if I remembered to brush my hair in the morning. Sometimes, I caught Tom looking at me. Not the way he used to, with warmth and affection, but with this cold, almost disdainful gaze that made me feel smaller than ever. There was something in his eyes, something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't just disappointment, it was more cutting than that. One night, I confronted him. "What happened to us, Tom? You used to look at me like I was your everything. Now, I feel like I'm just, I don't know, a disappointment to you." He shrugged, a gesture that seemed to carry all the weight of his growing indifference. "We've both changed, Anna. I'm just saying it like it is. If you don't like it, maybe you should do something about it." "Do something about it?" I echoed, my voice rising in frustration. "I'm doing everything I can here, Tom. It's not like I enjoy feeling like this, looking like this. But I don't have the luxury of time on my side, not like those women on TV." He just shook his head, turning back to whatever was on the screen, leaving me standing there, feeling more alone than ever. Tom's phone was like an extra limb for him, always by his side, until the day it wasn't. That day, he left it on the coffee table, buzzing with notifications, as he headed for the shower. Curiosity got the better of me. I wasn't proud of it, but there I was, sneaking a peek. A message popped up, bright against the dim kitchen light. "Miss you already." My heart sank, a lump forming in my throat. Before I could dig deeper, Tom emerged from the shower, snatching his phone up with a swiftness that spoke volumes. I didn't confront him right then. What was I going to say? Instead, I mulled over my next steps, tossing and turning with the decision. By morning, I had it figured out. I needed proof, solid evidence that I wasn't just imagining things. On a day I was supposed to go shopping, I made my way to a private detective agency instead. It felt like something out of a movie, sitting there, discussing my husband's potential affair with a stranger. "I think my husband is cheating on me," I told the detective, my voice steadier than I felt. The detective, a no-nonsense guy with a sympathetic nod, promised to look into it. "We'll get to the bottom of this," he assured me. All I could do then was wait and act normal, a performance that felt increasingly difficult with each passing day. Back at home, I played the part of the oblivious wife. Tom, oblivious to the storm brewing, continued on his path, criticizing me for trivial things and coming home late. "You could try a little harder around the house, you know," he'd say, oblivious to the irony as he dropped his coat on a chair I'd just cleared. I'd bite back my retorts, keeping my turbulent emotions under wraps. "Sure, Tom, I'll get right on that. I'd respond, my voice dripping with a sarcasm he seemed too distracted to catch. The detective called me with updates, a shadow tailing Tom, capturing moments of my life I was too afraid to witness firsthand. It felt like living in a suspense novel, except the ending would change my life forever. I didn't know what scared me more, confirming my suspicions or discovering I was wrong and simply driving myself crazy over nothing. Either way, I was stuck in this limbo, waiting for the detective's final report, pretending everything was fine. "How was your day?" Tom would ask, a question that once held warmth now felt like he was just going through the motions. "Fine," I'd answer, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. "Yours?" "Busy as always," he'd reply, his face buried in his phone again, likely messaging her, whoever she was. That Saturday turned my world on its head. It all started with a tornado alert blaring from my phone. Tom, quick to act as always, told me he was heading to the basement shelter. "Grab the weather radio from the shed. We'll need it to keep track of the tornado's path," he called out, already halfway down the stairs. I rushed to the shed, not thinking twice. My mind was on the safety of the shelter, not on the man I'd married and the secrets he kept. But as I rummaged through the clutter for the radio, the door slammed shut behind me. Panic surged as I realized I was locked in. "Tom, help! The door. It's stuck." I banged on the wood, hoping he'd hear me over the howling wind. Then, his voice, chilling and clear, came through the thin walls. "Sorry, Anna. It's better this way. For both of us." I froze, the radio forgotten in my hands. "What are you talking about, Tom?" "Open the door." He didn't budge. "This tornado's going to hit hard, Anna. It'll look like an accident. You'll be gone, and I'll be free." His confession hit me like a physical blow. Betrayal, fear, anger, I felt it all. But mostly, I felt determined. "You won't get away with this, Tom." But he was already gone, back to the safety of our basement, leaving me to fend for myself. I screamed for help, pounded on the door until my hands ached, but it was useless. The storm was too loud, and I was too far removed from anyone who could hear. Then, as despair started to set in, the door swung open. Mr. Jacobs, our elderly neighbor, stood there, his old dog by his side. "Lucky brought me here. Heard some noise over the wind. You okay, Anna?" I nearly collapsed with relief. "Tom, he locked me in. Said the tornado would kill me." Shock and concern flashed across Mr. Jacobs's face. "Let's get you to my basement, quick. We can sort the rest out later." Safe in Mr. Jacobs's basement, listening to the roar of the tornado above, I couldn't stop shaking. Tom's plan, his willingness to see me dead, it was all too much to take in. "I can't believe he'd do something like this," Mr. Jacobs said, his voice tight with anger. "I can't either, but we need to get through tonight. Can worry about Tom later," I replied, my mind racing with what to do next. The storm passed, leaving destruction in its wake, but I was alive, thanks to Mr. Jacobs. As for Tom, his betrayal was as clear as day. I knew then that my life would never be the same. After the storm calmed down, Mr. Jacobs and I stepped out from his basement, the air fresh but heavy with the aftermath. My house looked like it had been through a war, but nothing prepared me for the sight of the barn, smashed under the weight of debris. My folks and some neighbors huddled nearby, tears streaking their faces, staring at the wreckage like it was my final resting place. Then there was Tom, putting on a show, sobbing like he meant it. But the moment he caught sight of me, his tears dried up, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost. I marched right up to them, Mr. Jacobs at my heels. "I was in that barn," I said loud enough for everyone to hear, pointing at the crushed structure. "Tom locked me in there, hoping the storm would do his dirty work." Tom's act crumbled. "That's crazy, Anna. Why would I do something like that?" His voice was shaky, eyes darting around, looking for any kind of out. Mr. Jacobs stepped forward, his voice firm. "I found her, locked in from the outside. My dog led me to her, or she wouldn't be standing here now. My dad clenched his fists, but he didn't have time to do anything. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out, finding a message from the detective waiting with proof of Tom's affair, photos of him and that woman, smiling like they didn't have a care in the world. I turned the screen to face the crowd, showing them the kind of man Tom really was. Just then, the sound of sirens filled the air, and a police car pulled up. Mr. Jacobs didn't miss a beat. I called them. It's high time we dealt with him properly. Tom's face went from white to green. Anna, please, you've got this all wrong, he begged, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but disgust. Wrong? You locked me in a death trap, Tom. You're a liar and a cheat. There's nothing left to say. The cops came over, and after a quick exchange with Mr. Jacobs and a glance at the evidence on my phone, they turned to Tom. Sir, we're going to need you to come with us. Watching them cuff Tom and lead him away, I felt a mix of relief and heartbreak. Relief that he couldn't hurt me anymore, and heartbreak for the love I thought we had, now shattered beyond repair. My parents wrapped me in a hug, whispering words of comfort, while the neighbors murmured their support. It was over, but as I looked around at the broken barn, my broken home, I knew this was just the beginning of a long road to healing. In the aftermath of the storm and Tom's betrayal, life felt like a movie I'd walked into halfway through. The days blurred together, filled with police statements, legal consultations, and the endless support of family and neighbors. But through it all, one conversation kept replaying in my mind, a turning point that came about a week after the tornado. I was sitting with my parents in their living room, the wreckage of my own home a constant reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything. Anna, you can't let this define you, my dad said, his voice stern yet gentle. He'd always been my rock. You've got to fight back, take back control of your life. My mom nodded, taking my hand in hers. He's right, honey. Starting with pressing charges against Tom. And then, getting what's rightfully yours. I knew they were right, but the thought of facing Tom again, even in court, made my stomach churn. I can't believe he'd do this. After everything we've been through. It's hard, Anna, but we're here for you. We all are, my dad assured me, gesturing to the neighbors who'd come by daily, offering help, food, and comfort. Mr. Jacobs, who'd been like a guardian angel through it all, chimed in from the doorway. Got a bit of good news, Anna. The police have enough to charge Tom. And with the evidence from that detective, plus what he tried to do to you, he won't be getting off easy. A spark of something, relief, maybe, or vindication, flickered in me. Good. He deserves whatever's coming to him. And what about you, dear? What will you do next? My mom asked, worry creasing her brow. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their expectations, their hope for me to rise from this mess stronger. First, I'll make sure Tom pays for what he did. Then, I'll figure out the rest. Maybe it's time to start fresh, somewhere new. That's my girl, my dad said, pride evident in his voice. The legal battle that followed wasn't easy. Facing Tom in court, seeing the man I'd loved look at me with nothing but coldness, was harder than I'd imagined. But with each passing day, each small victory, I felt a bit more of myself return. When the judge finally ruled in my favor, granting me not just the divorce, but a significant portion of our assets, it felt like I could finally close this chapter of my life. Tom was sentenced to a few years behind bars for his attempt on my life, a fact that brought little joy but a lot of closure. I sold the house, the site of so many memories, both good and bad. With the money from the sale and the divorce settlement, I had more than enough to start over. So, where to now, Anna? Mr. Jacobs asked me one afternoon as we sat on his porch, looking out at the neighborhood that had been my home for so long. I'm not sure yet. Somewhere new, somewhere I can make new memories, be my own person again, I said, more to myself than to him. He nodded, understanding. You'll always have a place here, you know that. But I think you're making the right choice. Fresh start and all. I smiled, the first genuine smile in what felt like forever. Yeah, a fresh start. It sounds pretty good. And so, with my car packed and my past in the rearview mirror, I set out on a new adventure. I didn't know where I'd end up, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about what the future held. Tom had tried to break me, but in the end, he'd only shown me how strong I really was. And with that strength, I was ready to face whatever came next, on my own terms.